I actually grew up in Gardena, California, right here in the Los Angeles area. Very good town to grow up in because there's a lot of ethnic diversity and a large Japanese American population actually, and so that was kind of a second culture to me. And I ended up going to Japan a bunch of times, and I really was a Spanish major and liked languages. I was going to teach English as a second language and ended up playing in a Motown type band at Baby Huey's in Gardena with Rich Riley and the Tail Feathers. And then
one of my favorites.
Yes, that's right. And ended up trying it for a while and ended up here. Well, I think I always was quick with words, and when people were supposed to write poetry in junior high school and stuff like that, they'd come to me as their Cyrano de Bergerac to do their stuff for them, and it just kind of evolved. I played music, and the songs started coming. Travel is when it really started happening, because you got the high highs and the low lows to strip away the insulation, and that's when I really the songs started pouring out. When I first started getting songs out there, you could actually knock on the door of a publisher and even play a song live for them, and they would take single songs. I was seeking artist deals and that sort of thing, and pitching songs at the same time. And it was a wild time, but it was more of a mom and pop sort of situation. And the music business became more of the business than the music. But that was a fun time to be pitching songs. I actually was getting songs recorded by folk groups, in the later days of like around, in the 70s. My brother ran into Bobby Womack in San Francisco, and we had been fans of Bobby's. I grew up with a lot of R&B music. My brother had a magazine called Where's That Magazine, and he did an article, a free ad for Bobby's album because he'd met his assistant. So when he met him and said, "My brother's a songwriter," and Bobby rolled his eyes and went, "Yeah." When he mentioned, "Yeah, I know your secretary and I did a free ad for it," he said, "You know what? You tell your brother to come up here if he's what you say he is." I go up to San Francisco. I'm waiting at the studio with the Meters, with one of the baddest rhythm sections of all time, and eventually there was the Pointer Sisters and Herbie Hancock and all these people. And I had a reel-to-reel tape. I had my guitar. I had lyric sheets. Whatever he was going to ask for, I was going to have it. And he said, "Let me see those lyrics." He was kind of moving away from the person he had been writing with, and they were going to produce him rather than him producing himself. And so he looked at these lyrics and he said, "I like these. I tell you what, you come on in. We're laying down some tracks. I'll be home in a couple of days. If I like what you do, you're in." The first song that we did together was a song called Daylight, which was my first major success, and was a big R&B hit for him, and a lot of people have covered it since. I happened to be living at a house with my brother and another gentleman, and we had a few parties at the house, and it was really about, it's 5 o'clock a.m., the party's still going strong. He had written like the chorus idea. Okay. Looks like daylight's going to catch me up again. Right. And then I came up with the rest of the lyrics and some musical ideas, and then because the way that Bobby and I wrote in general, if you want me to get into that,
let's do it. Yeah.
Was more like we'd sit down and most of the musical ideas would be generated from him, the core of them, because he was going to be the artist. Right. So, and then we'd play around with it, and maybe I'd go home and write some lyrics to it, and then maybe come up with a bridge musically. They were very strange bedfellows. I mean, yeah. Bobby, and he, very admitted that he was through a very heavy drug period at that time. Yeah. I was straight as could be, when it comes to that. And so it was a little unusual. And there were times when he'd take me on trips where he was probably going to get something and I didn't even know it. Yeah. He was doing a drug run. And in the beginning, I just didn't know. I was so naive. Yeah. Yeah. But he appreciated where I came from, and he knew that I understood him, and we both pretty quick on our feet, both improv-wise, so it just worked. Bobby is like an icon, especially in the R&B world, to a lot of people, and we go in the studio, and he liked to sometimes have a menagerie of people in there. Oftentimes we'd go in there, and I was kind of the only white boy in there. Yeah. And a lot of people didn't know who this guy was, me, meaning me, and Bobby be in there singing a song, and sometimes he'd go in and not had rehearsed a song, and sometimes it came out even better. But there's sometimes where he'd be singing and I'd press the talkback button and go, Bobby, and the moment that I did that, the whole room got totally quiet, like this guy's stopping Bobby Womack in the middle of a take to record, to say something, and I'd say, Bobby, that's not really the melody, and the lyric is they went, not we went, and and they all just looked at me. And then when they realized that I was a co-writer, then it was a different thing. But sometimes he'd even play it off, like he'd go, yeah, what are you talking, it's just he'd mess with me, made it even worse. The more recent project we were on was when we went to the UK in 2012 or so, and
Album of the Year in the UK.
Yeah, the Q Award, Album of the Year, and Bobby was, it was with Damon Albarn, who's like one of the biggest artists in, with Blur and Gorillaz, the front man for them, and does all kinds of projects. And it was with Richard Russell, the owner of XL Records, which is Adele's label, which was exploding at that time. Bobby had done an album with Gorillaz and toured with them and done a couple of songs for them, and so they wanted to do a solo album. And so Bobby says, well, I want to bring Harold, and they go, Harold? Smarrold? What do we got Damon Albarn and Bobby Womack, and and Bobby's, to his credit, and I will always be grateful to him for this, he said, you know what, I want to bring Harold. They said, okay, but you're going to have to take it out of your half of the, and right. He still said, go for it. And wow, so we go to England, no pressure, no pressure. And I walk in the studio and he pulls out an album of mine that had one of our songs on it that I'd recorded called Break the Chain. And he played this song and they were blown away by the opening of it, because it had it's the bravest man in the universe is the one who has forgiven first. And they loved that line. But they had another track that they felt would be better for that, so we made it a derivative copyright, and then we wrote the lyrics, to the new thing. It became the title song to the album, and I was in. And then over the next couple of days, they got to see how we would work. We'd come in the studio, I'd go home and woodshed, and by the time I came back in the morning, because I was on LA time, which is at 4 o'clock in the morning, maybe I'd stay up to, right. But I'd come in and the song would be ready to go practically, and so it really worked well the way. And Bobby and I would discuss it, and then he'd put his magic on in the studio. And I love the way those guys worked. I mean, these are two guys that are, heavyweight guys in the business, zillionaires, and they both would ride their bike to the studio, and they would be in there from 10 to 5 or 10 to 6 every day, just like kids in a sandbox. So unpretentious, yeah. And it was really great to work with them. I took a class at UCLA where they talked about how to make and sell your own record, and she talked about artist-oriented promotion versus concept-oriented. I thought, well, if I put out something with just my face on it, people won't know what it is. But if you say Beatles ballads on hammered dulcimer, then people know what they're going to get. So when I put out a sampler from my label, I thought, what kind of music have I been doing? I looked back for 20 years, and the thread was positive. So I put out this CD called The Power of Positive Music, and my idea was going forward to put out, compilation albums with positive music. And then people said, well, there are places we can play, and some of them were like Unity churches and that sort of a thing. I write universal positive music, and so wherever they want me to do it, I'll do it. And then there's an organization called Empower Music and Arts. It started having this Posi Fest every year, and it plugged in perfectly with what I'm doing, and now I have places all across the country where I can do that in addition to what I'm doing. The great thing is that I'm not an admin sort of a guy so much, and these guys did what I would have wanted to do, but putting out positive music compilations and doing tours. They're called Posi-Palooza tours. For a long time, I've been doing improv. It started with me forgetting other people's lyrics and then making it my own, and then playing in places where there was birthday all the time. Instead, I'd just make up a song, and then Then I started taking titles from the audience, and then I put it into the show, and people would say, well, could you do a song for so-and-so? And then it evolved to custom songs being, and some meeting planners found me, and I started doing celebrities. I did one for Regis Philbin. I just did one for a very famous actor who I can't mention because it hasn't been done yet. It's done, but it hasn't been presented yet. It goes back to the days of Beethoven and Mozart, you know, having a nobleman hire them to do their music. And in these times, I think it's an open opportunity for everybody to do custom songs. There's plenty of room for all of us. So sometimes I also do recap improv. So, or summarizing. So at the National Speakers Association, which I've been going to the conferences because I do a little bit of speaking, I recapped all 8 of the main stage speakers in a song. So right after, like 2 people would speak, and I'd go up and I'm taking notes in the back. If it's a long enough speech, I'm taking notes and then thinking in my mind what the melody would be and going up and doing it. If it's a real short speech, I just go up and wing it. But so that was how I got connected with doing a TEDx talk, because they wanted to know if I could explain how to do that. So I came up with the title, Preparing for Spontaneity. It's only a 6-minute talk, but it was a great experience. I met some incredible people and who I still work with and do events for. And it's kind of great street cred to have a TED Talk or TEDx talk. There's a famous songwriter, Sammy Kahn, and when he asked what comes first, the words or the music, and he said the phone call.
Yeah.
And so part of that is the hyper focus that when you're put on the spot and you go into that right brain moment and you say, okay, the camera's on or the recorder's on, I'm going to go for it. There's something about that makes you focus, and that you create things that you wouldn't if your left brain gets in the way. Yes. And so to me, that's kind of what it's about. Yeah. But letting the good stuff come out and then circle the best. On the creative side, I would just say, if you're a performer, it's the Nike syndrome, just do it. Because to me, that's where the rubber meets the road, is going out there and doing it, not only for improving your craft, but including getting exposed to people and connecting with people that might be your collaborator or people that might help you in the business. It's really showing up. That, to me, that's the most important thing. It might be door number 7 or door number 92 that you knock on. But if it's not something that you love, then you're in the wrong business, because you'll never last long enough to do it. And as far as the business side, it's different, but I think there's always a way. It's always changing, and have a diversified portfolio of all the things that you've done in your life and put them all together and create something. And if you are a sailor, maybe you make an album about sailing, and whatever it is. I like qWaqqchat because it's people representing songwriters in their real essence, their unbridled brilliance, which is not always captured by somebody recording their song. It might be something that was quietly done in the studio that's a gem that the light never shone upon. There's people that have great stuff that has not come out there, so I really appreciate the fact that someone, you, is shining the light on that.